Speaking English, the solution for humanity.
Oh, people of the world, can we spare a little justice? Can we spare a little peace for the children of war? Oh, people of the world, can we spare a little love? Can we spare a little bread for children of war? Children of
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome again to this series on renewing civilizations, what we can learn from the best practices of the Muslims. We're wrapping up the series today, and we hope that you've tuned in on the prior 4 series where we talked about some other issues that are related to what we're talking about today. What we tried to do in each of the prior 4 episodes was give you an idea of some value or some idea, some concept that might be useful to the Muslims and the non-Muslims to deal with the economic, environmental, and ethical crises that people are facing throughout the world. What we're trying to do is give you some ideas, and really it's about starting a conversation in terms of dealing with the economic, environmental, and ethical crises that we see facing human beings throughout the world. And so what we did is that we, first of all, tried to lay a foundation for some ideas of where we're coming from, and then work our way through looking at 4 values, and we'll finish today looking at the 5th and final values that we hope will start a conversation that will move the Muslims and non-Muslims as well toward peaceful coexistence and developing an infrastructure of civilization that includes the values that we talked about. The first value that we talked about in our first show was the value of forbearance. Forbearance, what does it mean as far as we're concerned? Forbearance means tolerance. Forbearance means patience. Forbearance means being good-natured in good times and bad. Easiest for us to be good-natured when things are going well, but it's much more difficult to be good-natured when we're stressed out a little bit and we're a little bit tense. It's very difficult for us to be good-natured. So this forbearance is a very important foundational idea, in my view. Allah knows best. But in my view, for having a good civilization, and we find it exemplified in the role model of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, when he had to suffer resistance from the Meccans, ridicule from the Meccans, and then the rage of the Meccans that led to a boycott and also led to a plot to kill him just as he was making migration from Mecca to Medina. So we saw, if we study the seerah or biography of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, we'll find that he was a paragon of forbearance in spite of what people tried to do to him at that particular time, even including when he ended up conquering Mecca, not being a person who took revenge on people who treated him that way, because many of them were still alive at that particular time, but he still didn't take revenge on them. He was a model of hilm, or forbearance. And so that's the first concept that we say that you need in order to renew civilization, and we offer it from the Muslim perspective. The second concept that we suggest is the concept of the rule of law, the rule of law. Now, we're talking about this in the context of the migration of Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina. From Mecca to Medina, we see the genius of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, by imposing a relationship greater than brotherhood between the Ansars and the Muhajirin. And we see the genius enshrined in what's called the Charter or the Constitution of Medina, the Charter or the Constitution of Medina. In this Constitution, you had enshrined the rule of law. That is, the rule of law, the concept that nobody was above the law. And the authority from that law came from Allah and His Messenger Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. But the rights of the Jewish tribes were protected, the rights of the Arab tribes, and it was specifically said in this document, and you go back and read it. Again, if you have access to the internet, it's very easy to get. There's more than one version of it, but it's the Charter of Medina. You'll find that this charter specifically says that no one, no Jew, will be punished for Jewishness. I mean, this is affirmative action over 1,400 years ago, what we call affirmative action in the United States of America. So this is the rule of law enshrined in the document, and this is part of the genius of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So that's the second concept, rule of law. The third concept is God consciousness, something that Muslims call taqwa. God consciousness, something Muslims call taqwa. And this concept is enshrined not only in that charter, but in the book that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, brought, the book of Allah that he brought. And a book is not a dead tome. It's a book that comes alive for the Muslims in many, many ways, simply because, not the least of which, because there are other ways that it comes alive for the Muslims, because it's used in Muslim schools as the seminal work that people study, even young children up until people on the PhD level. But the point is that because it is part of the liturgy of the Muslims, part of the worship of the Muslims, that every Muslim who says they follow the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, they must recite from this book 5 times a day. And the things that you say, believe it or not, psychologists can tell you this, the things that you say tend to become a part of you. And we talked about the prominence of phrases like Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And so we're talking about a God consciousness that's infused through the language of the Muslim, what we say, how we present what we say, and that kind of thing that includes words like Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and so forth. And so we're talking about a conversation that infuses God consciousness 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so those are the first 3 concepts. First is forbearance. The second is the rule of law. The third is God consciousness. And then the third one we talked about was the concept of universal education. The third one, universal education. Because if you want a stable civilization, then it would be good to have universal education in that polity. Because an educated citizenry that will not be oppressed by whoever's in charge, but also will add vibrancy and stability to that civilization. And so Islam encourages this universal education. And we began by talking about what Muslims believe was the first revelation to Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and that was Iqra. And no matter how you translate this, you get the notion of read in terms of reading the text, read in terms of proclaiming or reciting, or read in terms of reading the creation, which is what scientists and geologists and the like do, and that this is intellectually engaging, and that the whole notion of education is so, so very important. I mean, there are many hadith, there are many reports of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, saying things like, if you educate your daughters, this is a pathway, this is a door to Jannah, or a pathway to paradise, a pathway to heaven for you. So education, universal education, is something that we offer as being very, very important. And we talked about the function of education, both in the Islamic civilization as well as in other civilizations, to transmit culture, to maintain culture, and that third function, to transform culture. And we gave examples of this from within the Muslim polity, and we pointed out that as to the last two, as to maintaining and transforming culture, it's not only non-Muslims have some work to do in terms of transforming ideas about God consciousness and being fair and being just. Muslims, as we look around the Muslim world, have some work to do in this regard, because there was one time, as we pointed out, Andalus, in the golden age of Islam, one of the golden ages of Islam, and Baghdad, another golden age of Islam, when Muslims were the model for educational excellence, were the model for intellectual synergy. They were the model. People made hijrah to come and study with the Muslims. And so if we understand this, we understand that universal education is something civilizations need, and also Muslims need to reinvigorate within their own situation. So what we've done is introduce the last segment of this program by recapping the 4 concepts that we talked about before. When we come back, we'll talk about fifth and final concept and wrap up this discussion of renewing civilizations, what we can learn from the best practices of the Muslims. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Islamic International School presents
The purpose of creation is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
precious presenters,
The moral excellence is one of the major objectives of Islam.
promising broods,
It is the belief in Allah. The Quran is the greatest miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you are neglecting the rights of other people, then you are becoming immoral. An arrogant person will never enter the Jannah. Death is not the final destination.
budding role models,
Ekam Braham Dyutya Naste. Bhagwan ek hi hai, dursa nahi hai, zara bhi nahi hai.
Watch Dais of Islamic International School in Trendsetters every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 10:30 a.m. UK on Peace TV.
ولله الأسماء الحسنى فادعوه بها
Al-Aziz, the Almighty. Al-Wadud, the All-Loving. At-Tawwab, the Acceptor of your return. Al-Razzaq, the Provider. Al-Raqib, the All-Watchful. وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. To Allah belongs the beautiful names. فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. So call Him upon them. To understand more of Allah's beautiful names, join me, your brother Majid Mahmood, on my new series about understanding Allah's beautiful names on Peace TV.
الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى.
Don't miss the chance to comprehend the seamless explanation of Allah's beautiful names in Understanding Allah's Beautiful Names. Every Saturday at 7 p.m. and repeat telecast at 12 p.m. UK on Peace TV.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What we've done before the break was review the 4 points that we've covered in the 4 episodes preceding on this topic, renewing civilizations, what we can learn from the best practices of the Muslims. Renewing civilizations, what we can learn from the best practices of the Muslims. And so what we did was recap those 4, those being forbearance, rule of law, God consciousness, and universal education. And now what we want to do is wrap up this segment and the series, and we hope that you've learned something from it that will spark a longer conversation, spark some more reading, some more understanding, and some discussions within the Muslim community and between Muslims and non-Muslims. All right, so the last concept that we feel that you can learn from the best practices of Muslim civilizations is the concept of equity. I'd like to talk about it in 2 ways. One is the concept of shura. One is the concept of shura or consultation. And the second one is the concept of equality, is the concept of equality. One is the concept of shura, the other is the concept of equality. Let's talk about shura first. There is a chapter in the Quran that's entitled shura, the meaning of which is consultation. Again, if we look at the tafsir, the commentary of Ibn Kathir, again, this commentary is found online very easily for those who have access to the internet, and in Islamic bookstores for those of you who don't. It's very, very easy to find. He says amongst the attributes of those who are near to God, who are close to God, are those who run their affairs by consultation. In other words, when you have a situation that is not ordained clearly by God, that is something like praying 5 times a day, most Muslims believe this is fard. This is an obligation to do. Saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah as the basis, Tawheed, most Muslims believe. And so if it's something that's not clearly ordained by God, that part of the attributes of a Muslim is to run your affairs by shura. Shura where? Consultation where? Consultation in your family. Consultation in your communities. We have many, many, many examples of this with the family. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, with the famous treaty that he made with the Quraysh when he tried to make Hajj the first time, and he made a treaty, and when the companions didn't want to follow him, he had consultation with his wife. Not an unusual thing, because one of his first consultations was with his first wife, Khadijah. May Allah be pleased with her. So consultation in the family, obviously if you follow the pattern of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is very, very important. Consultation in the community. In the Battle of Uhud, for instance, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, took the counsel of people with whom he disagreed. Read the seerah, read the biography of the Prophet in relationship to the Battle of Uhud, U-H-U-D, Uhud. You'll find that he favored a different strategy, but since this is not something that Allah had ordained, that the Creator had ordained, he took consultation from other people in his community. And so even in the larger community, in larger matters, he would call a shura council in order to consult with people in the community. And this brings about equity. Equity, what's equity? The feeling that I have rights that are similar to the rights of others in this body politic. This brings about equity in the community, this whole concept of shura. And this is a concept that's extremely important to the Muslims and should be important to the non-Muslims. And let me just say parenthetically for a moment that often people say there's a inherent clash between democracy and Islam. I would argue, based on the concept of shura and based on the varieties of democracy that you find in the world today, I would argue, based on the concept of shura and the sheer varieties of democracy that you find in the world today, from the democracy in Britain, for instance, in the UK, is not the same as democracy in the United States of America, even though one came out of the other. For instance, the libel laws, for instance, in UK are much more restricted. That is, free speech, as we know, is much more restricted in the UK than it is in the United States of America. What's my point here? Democracy is not one thing. Democracy isn't Western liberal democracy only, because even where the word came from, Greek democracy, for instance, was a very restricted thing. And so there are different forms of democracy. With that in mind, there's no clash. There's no inherent clash, as Noah Feldman argued in his book, After Jihad. Noah Feldman, F-E-L-D-M-A-N. So my point is that shura or consultation is one of those concepts from Islam that helped bring about equity in the early Muslim community. And it's something that we could think about, reinstituting amongst the Muslims, particularly in some of the Muslim countries where we have dictatorships or 1 or 2 or 3 person rule. It's something that we can think about reinstituting in order to revive Islamic civilization and in order to offer this concept to the broader community. The other issue is the whole issue of equality. One thing is clear from reading the Quran, which is the primary source of Islam, from looking at the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and from looking at documents like the Charter of Medina, that Islam was revolutionary in the regard to advancing the rights of the dispossessed. If you look at the Quran, if you look at the biography of Prophet Muhammad, if you look at the documents like the ones we've discussed in this series, like the Charter of Medina, Islam was revolutionary for its time in advancing the rights of dispossessed or the rights of people were different. What do I mean by this? When you look at the concept of shura, for instance, again, this is an argument for when matters that are not clearly contravened by Allah and His Messenger for consultation between people. Islam, for instance, encouraged the freedom of slaves, even though it didn't abolish slavery. That one of the things that Islam clearly did, if you read the Quran, if you read, because it talks about the freeing of a slave being a praiseworthy thing, it talks about, if you read a hadith, and you read the seerah of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, it talks about clothing and feeding the slave and treating the slave in a manner to which you would be treated. This is like the golden rule for slavery. It improved the position of slavery. Prominent Muslims like Zayd, like Bilal, prominent Muslims were former slaves. Bilal was one of the people that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said to him, the meaning of which that he heard him before him in the Jannah, in the paradise. And he was a black man, he was Abyssinian, who was a former slave. And so the dispossessed found a more comfortable place with Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, than they found outside the community, slaves included. When we look at the issue of gender, we find that the status of women was measurably improved under Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The status of women was measurably improved under Prophet Muhammad. First of all, under Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, you were more likely to survive than you were under Quraysh. Because the Quraysh had this infanticide where there were people who buried their girl babies alive. They buried their girl babies alive. And this is something that's clearly documented in the Quran. And this is something that is a heinous crime against humanity as outlined in the Quran. And this is something that was changed by Islam. That's number one. Number two, women were given property rights that they didn't have before the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that many women didn't get until the 19th and 20th century in the West. This is 1,400 years ago, the right to own property. The fact that a woman, when she married, had no obligation to give any of her property to her husband in order to maintain the household, had no obligation to work to bring money into the household. And if she did, if she had an inheritance, if she brought money into the household, had no obligation to give it up. This is a major revolutionary step in Islam, that the women were no longer property, that they were full persons unto themselves, that they could own property, that they could keep for themselves. This is a major change. And then if you look at how our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, treated women, if you look at how he treated women, that is to say, he never hit women, he never said harsh words to them. Indeed, we have many reports of women saying harsh words to him and him being a picture of him or forbearance. Him being a picture of forbearance. What was he? He was patient with the words they said to him. He was tolerant with the words they said to them. And he was good-natured even when they were being mean to him. And so this is revolutionary. A person who came out of a patriarchal society, who was looked to as the prophet of the Creator, this person dealing with women in this particular way, and not only was he forbearing with them, he took their counsel seriously. He took their counsel seriously. We've already talked about the incident where the first Hajj that he tried to make to Mecca, and he signed a treaty with the Quraysh. Then he took counsel when the Sahabas, the companions of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, when they wanted not to abide by, he took counsel with Salama, may Allah be pleased with her, who was the wife who came along with him at that particular time. It wasn't unusual for him to bring his wife along. It wasn't unusual for him to do business in front of his wives and ask their opinion. This, even in this day and age, is seen as being a revolutionary concept. And so the status of women was improved dramatically. The status of slaves was improved dramatically. And the status of people who were different, like somebody who was dark-skinned like Bilal, was improved dramatically under the leadership of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And so we have this concept of equity that we need to revive in Islam and that we need to offer to other societies. This is very, very important to renewing civilizations. This is one of the 5 principles that's important. And we offer it from Islamic best practices in terms of shura and the equity and the improvement, the equality, the improvement of the lives of the people who were dispossessed under the leadership of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So we talked about 5 issues. There certainly are more issues that you can talk about in terms of renewing civilizations. We hope that we've started a conversation that will continue amongst the Muslims, that will continue amongst the non-Muslims, that will continue between the Muslims and non-Muslims about the issues of forbearance, the issues of rule of law, the issues of God consciousness, the issues of universal education, and the issues of equity that we find in the best practices of Muslims. And we hope that you've learned something good from this series. Any mistakes I made have come from me. Any good that I provided comes from the Creator alone. We pray that this has been beneficial to you. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
People of the world, can we spare a little justice? Can we spare a little peace for the children of war? Oh, people of the world, can we spare a little love? Can we spare a little prayer for the children of war?
The value of money in the hereafter will be measured by its proper use in the present.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلة ولا شفاعة.
According to the glorious Quran, one of the best ways to use your money is to spend it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by spreading His message of Islam. Peace TV is a non-profit Islamic satellite television channel that is primarily dedicated for just that cause, the proper presentation of Islam. It's a great choice to invest in it and a golden opportunity to purify your wealth in a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Support Peace TV. Send your zakat and donations to IRFI Al Ryan Bank, 47 Calthorpe Road, Birmingham, UK, B151TH. Pound account number 011-32301. IBAN GB49ARAY 30008301 132301. Sort code 300083. Swift BIC code ARAY GB22. Please confirm your contribution at support@peacetv.tv.
Support Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran that He created the death and the life for the purpose of testing us.
Taqwa and truthfulness, humility and repentance, kindness and gratefulness.
Are you prepared for the final exam? Are you ready?
Generosity and tenderness give true value to life.
To answer the most important exam that you will ever face.
Dr. Jonathan Gonzalez.
Live your life on purpose.
Learn to utilize every moment of life to make it meaningful and precious in Live Your Life on Purpose. Every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 11:30 a.m. UK on Peace TV.